Hello, hope you're doing great today. I have a story for you about when I was younger, when I started to get into video games. My family never had a lot of money, so we were behind by many years when it came to the console system that we were using. For example, when PlayStation 2 was out, I was still playing on the Nintendo 64. When I first started doing gaming, I was playing on the Super Nintendo and the original Nintendo. I remember playing the Zelda games a lot and playing the Mario ones especially a lot as well. But I still think that my favorite of all time from the Nintendo was playing Zelda. I liked the challenges and fighting all the bosses and figuring things out in the game. I felt like it improved my memory and made me think a lot better. And then as I moved into the Super Nintendo, when I started playing the Super Nintendo, I continued playing the Zelda games. I started playing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and I remember at the time, to me, the graphics seemed to be so amazing. It was, wow, this is so realistic. It's so new in 3D, and you look at the games that are out now and everything's, completely three-dimensional, and they can render something to where it's realistic, like it's right there in front of you, such as VR and, those games where it's like a completely different reality. And I couldn't even imagine at that time, at that age, the concept of how games are now. Although I don't do any gaming now because I'm really busy with work and I'm really busy with doing a lot of drawing. I kept playing that game until they came out with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and that was my absolute favorite game that I've ever played. And first time it was just so far ahead as far as the gameplay and everything. And I don't think I ever played Majora's Mask. I might have one time at a friend's house. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was for the Nintendo 64. I also had several other games, and my second favorite game that I played for the Nintendo 64 was Turok. I played that game for hours and hours every day, and I kept playing the Ocarina of Time game up until about 2002, I think, or 2003. And I continued playing it until it came out with the Wind Waker game for Zelda. The Wind Waker game of Zelda, that was on the Nintendo GameCube. I had this other game called Soul Calibur, and I had a blast playing that as well. But before I had the Nintendo GameCube, I had the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2. But I didn't get to PlayStation 2 until I think it was 2003. But I was still playing the Legend of Zelda games, even though they were from older systems. I just continued playing them because I just found them so fun. Even though you had better game systems such as the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2, and the Nintendo GameCube, it just had such solid gameplay that the graphics didn't really matter that much to me. And for the PlayStation 1, I was playing, it was the 007 games, and I have to think really hard because I get some of the games between the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2 confused, and because I had both of them. Another game I'll never forget playing was called The Legend of Dragoon. It came with 4 CDs in the case, and it was a very long game. There was a lot of adventure, there was so many things to do, and I remember playing it, and I kept getting to the boss at the end of the game, but my character's level was about 30 levels too low to be able to fight him because there were so many times where I'd have a group of enemies that I had to fight, and I would just avoid them. I would move around them or do what I could so that I could try to get to the next boss, and the bosses were so hard that way. And I know that when I got to the final boss, every time I got to him, when his health was low, the game would freeze, so I was never able to beat him. So I think one day I want to go back and replay that game and go through it again and finally beat the boss. When I was playing this game, this was at my grandparents' house when I lived in Florida. I would go to visit them maybe every couple of months for maybe a few days, and during the summer I would stay there for a couple weeks with my family. And I remember just being in my room, and I was just so absorbed in the game. My grandpa would come in and he would ask me, "Jacob, how long have you been in here?" And I would tell him, I don't know, maybe an hour or two. And I'd ask him what time it is, and it would have been 9 or 10 hours. But there was just so much adventure in the game, and I was just having so much fun with it. I always had a lot of interest in games that had challenges that made me think a lot, and were the type of games that were kind of medieval or the Dark Ages or like Renaissance themed type of stuff that is, and The Legend of Dragoon has a little bit of that in it because of the armor and everything they're wearing. And the Legend of Zelda games, medieval type of game. And I've always just really loved those type of games with the whole combat system and everything that's set up in it. As I got older, I started to get more into PC games, and I started playing Age of Empires, Empire Earth, Age of Mythology. And those games were like the real-time strategy, and they incorporated the medieval and the Renaissance age to it. And I love the whole atmosphere of it, and building up a big city and everything. And then I remember getting the SimCity games, and I had a blast playing those because the challenge, I would set the difficulty to really high, and I would put it to where there was a lot of disasters. So when I was playing the game, there was a lot of more things happening. For example, I'd build a good portion of my city, and then an asteroid would come in and destroy half of it, and I'd have to rebuild everything. The first PC games I started playing was Diablo 1 and StarCraft 1. I continued playing StarCraft 1 up until 2007, and a few years later they came out with StarCraft 2. There's so many different games that I've played. I think for each of them, I'll have to make a story for an individual video. My first MMORPG game was RuneScape. I started playing that back in 2001. I heard about it from a friend of mine that I went to school with, and I heard them talking about some game, and I wasn't sure what it was, so I went over and asked them. They started telling me all these stories about some game that was set in a time that was from hundreds of years ago, and you could be a character and upgrade your armor and do all these things. From that point on, up until 2007, I played the game a lot every single day. It helped get my mind off of things, and drawing was always there as well, but it was just something that was an extra small escape to help me get over things. I continued playing the game until 2016. From 2007 until about 2013, I only played the game for maybe an hour a day at most. And then from 2013 to 2015, I would play maybe once or twice a week for an hour or two, and that was really it. Because I had different goals and different things were happening in my life, and I just didn't have the time for it. I started picking it up again in 2016. In 2016, I had a lot of choices to make about where I wanted to go with my life and what I wanted to do. 2017 is the year that I devoted myself to art, and now the story continues. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, but for now, I'm going to do some drawing. I look forward to making more of these videos, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Please subscribe, and have a good night.